topic number 3. And by the way, that was a very good conversation. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate that prompt, and I appreciate you guys for the conversation. That was very good. Should read topic number 3 says, with Burkina Faso's new family code, if they can ban this, why can't interracial relations also be banned? So there's a little bit of a continuation of that topic. This takes us to Twitter again. Hold on, let me reshare that again because I lost connection. It says, hold on. Where is it? Right there. Okay, so this is from Lumumba's briefcase, aka Brother Legend. It says, please also ban interracial marriage or limit the access of non-African spouses to community resources. Otherwise, your country will look like Michael Jackson's kids in 2 generations. So the original tweet is from Bricks News. It says, just in, Burkina Faso officially adopts law banning homosexuality with up to 5 years in prison. Let me see if there's more. Someone says here, LOL, that's too funny. They can't ban interracial marriages. However, what they may ban is any leader in the future who is married to a white chick should be disqualified to run for president. And Lumumba, aka Brother Legend, responds, they can ban it. America banned it for centuries. And there are countries like Japan and France that had rules banning it. It can be done. Quote, if we don't handle our independence very well, colonizers will come back in the form of investors. As Simon Mwanzi Kapwepwi, I think that's how you pronounce it. Sorry if I butchered it. But again, Burkina Faso officially adopts law banning homosexuality with up to 5 years in prison. And the prompt says, with Burkina Faso's new family code, this is what this is about. If they can ban this, why can't interracial relationships be banned as well? Let me start with Kofi on this one. Kofi, what are your thoughts?
Oh man.
That's why I went to you first, but go ahead.
Well, I had to get my thoughts together a little bit because I like to be the devil's advocate at the end of after everyone gives their thoughts. I have no real objection to this, but it is kind of like drawing the line on. Look, before I even move forward. Africa and African countries have every right to do whatever they want to do. They don't need the UN's permission. They don't need white people's permission to do what they want to do. When the United States want to do something, they put the middle finger up to everyone and say, suck it. We're the United States. Same thing. We're Burkina Faso. Suck it. We do what we want to do. We're our own people. I'm governor. You run your country. I run my country. They have every right to do what they want to do. The thing is really not pushback, but it kind of borderlines where the UN people could say, well, you're trying to be an ethno state. There's going to be no democracy, and you guys are engaging in reverse racism or whatever. You guys aren't with the times. This, that, and the other. But I have no real problem with it at all whatsoever. I just know that there's going to be a fallout when it comes to these things. They're going to try to drum up some type of human rights abuse or some type of civil rights violation globally that they're having. That it's gonna. It could turn bad because again, Burkina Faso, they're self-sufficient. They're into trade. So from a PR standpoint, they can say, why are you going to trade with a racist country, with a bigoted country? You see what I'm saying? That could be the fallout in this particular campaign. What I would say, what they say about Teddy Roosevelt, I walk quietly, but I walk with a big stick. I don't think there's something that that they need to publicize. Well, we're not going to have no white people that. Yeah, no problem with that. I wouldn't publicize that. Everybody knows the United States is racist. Everyone knows the United States but they don't go around publicizing that. It's in practice. And you can always, someone says, well, you guys are racist. You can always deny it. Hey, look, on the books, it says here that, you got the 14th Amendment, the 13th Amendment. Look at the Civil Rights Act. How are we racist? But they're racist in their practice, not in their laws. So I think that's what they need to do. But as far as Burkina Faso, and I'll say this about other African countries, as far as homosexuality is concerned, with banning homosexuality and or even having jail sentences, or even go as far extreme as executions, that is barbaric. And I think that has to do with African traditions. Now, there's been gay people has always been existed. So this is not the first time Africa's been dealing with gay people. Gay people is like, in African societies, is like that cousin that you just don't talk about, or why this person is like in their 30s and very good looking person, but don't have a wife yet, don't have a husband yet, and everybody just knows she's with that friend for like 5 years for a while, but no one says anything, right? But the problem with it goes too far with Africans, where people gonna say, well, it's backwards and barbaric, where you're executing people and you're imprisoning people for a sexual lifestyle. You don't have to, to me, that's very backwards, and that is very, very old fashioned. And to me, that's is something to me that needs to be eradicated. Hey, look, I don't believe in demonizing people when it comes to that, because if you really think about it, as heterosexual men on this panel, we can't fathom the fact of being with another man versus being with a beautiful black woman. It's total insanity for us to think that. I can't think that. It's kind of nauseating. But with that being said, that's how these people aren't pretending. They're not doing this to get attention, because their lives could be endangered. So this tells you something about a people that I don't think they want to understand, that they rather just demonize and kill. So when it comes to those two things, that's my POV on those two situations. So I know I probably might get pushed back for it, but that's okay. But I yield the mic.
No, pushback is fine. I put up a post on the community tab a couple of days back that disagreement, difference of opinion doesn't mean it's an argument or some big thing. But I do think the 5-year thing is more of a deterrent. But I like what Musings and Bloom in the chat is kind of saying. If you make people go what they call DL, make people go DL, you stand to put women and children's health at risk. And I do kind of understand that. But I'd like the panel to later on address what should the alternative necessarily be.
Can I piggyback on that real quick and just get people to understand my real quick POV when it comes to homosexual people? I'll tell her, so you could check this on my channel. One of the first videos I did. I have 8 aunts and uncles, right? We all have our favorites and stuff like that, but I love them all. But my favorite aunt, right, died from HIV because of a guy that was on the DL. And she saved me from a lot. And I hated gay people for a while. Now, this has happened in the early 90s. So the story is she never slept around, because back in the 80s, only people that had AIDS were drug addicts and gay people, especially if you're a man. So all I remember before I knew my aunt had AIDS, she just got married. She graduated. She was a social worker. Graduated found a husband, got married, had a baby, and everything you're supposed to do. Everything is wonderful. And then one day, uh, my little baby niece got sick, and my baby niece, my niece, my cousin, my baby cousin, she just died. And then I assumed because she died and her husband couldn't take the pain, they got a divorce. Come to find out was they even lied to my grandmother. My aunt found out she had AIDS when she was pregnant or when she had my cousin. And she's like, "What?" And it's like, "Yes. My baby cousin died when she was 2 due to complications of HIV. My aunt gave it to her husband. He eventually died. That's why they split up. All because she said, she sat me down and she says, this, protect yourself to this. It was a guy that I was with. It was like the first guy I was with. I think it was the first guy or the second guy she's ever with. She's in college. And I tracked him because he said, I have not been with a lot of people. I've been probably like 3 people and found out that, yes, he had AIDS and I got it from him. Why? Because he's on the DL. He has to hide. He has to pretend to be something that he's not. So let me try women out. You know what I'm saying? And it devastated my whole family to the point I hated gay people. I hated gay people with a fucking passion. But I had to learn and understand why what happened happened. And that means me listening to both sides, to people of why they do the things that they do. If you want to know more about that, just go on my channel. It's one of the first videos that I ever made. So if we want to tackle a problem, we have to be honest and put aside our own biases. That's it.
Appreciate that, Kofi. I remember you talking about this before on your channel. By the way, if you haven't subscribed to Kofi's channel, Kofi the Black Critic on YouTube, you can find them in my subs area if you can remember. Part of KWAZ Radio. Check out Kofi and the lives that he does. Cheryl says, so sorry for your loss to Kofi. Much appreciated, Cheryl. Thanks for coming through. Greetings to you too. Haven't seen you in a couple of weeks. I hope recent discourse on the panel didn't make you kind of shy away from the show, but I do appreciate you being here today. With that said, let me hear from Buana next. Buana, what's it?
Yes, sir. So let me start here because Kofi made several points that I want to address. So America talks about you don't want to be perceived as an ethno state, even though if everyone remember, I don't know if you all guys remember or old enough to remember, America did business with South Africa. Ronald Reagan did business at the time when South Africa was behaving like an ethno state. They had no problem with it. So now the pot calling the kettle black and say, "Oh, we don't want to do business with people who are operating as an ethno state because we have to." That's not been the history of the United States and how they have no problem doing business with countries who have an ethno state kind of tinge or bend. They have no problem because Ronald Reagan was doing business with South Africa when the world was looking at it kind of funny style. Had no problem. Now they turn in their head and say, "Well, you don't want to behave." No. We ain't gonna do that. We're not doing that. In terms of banning homosexuality, yeah, it's not the culture. It's not the culture of Burkina Faso to engage in that practice. Now, the Western practice may be different, but they have a right to behave. No one could tell the Americans you shouldn't do that. Oh, we don't like y'all doing it. And Americans will stick up their middle finger and say, F you. We have our own country, we have our own rights, and we should behave as we wish. So why is it not good for the goose, good for the gander? The Burkina Faso can say, well, this is not a part of our culture. We ban these ideas, these radical homosexuals, just like how they said radical left. The radical homosexuals are trying to create a culture that's not consistent with the culture of Burkina Faso. And as a government, we should decide the direction of where we want our people to go. There should be no issues with that. No issues with that. But as far as banning relationships, I would say this. Um, now, Burkina Faso has done Burkina Faso. I think Traore says he's a Pan African. I'm not sure. I think he says he is. But even if he is not, the Russians do business with Burkina Faso. The North Koreans do business with Burkina Faso. I don't know. I say that small steps first. Let's take care of the business at hand first before we put an American jacket on the issues involving the country of Burkina Faso. Because we could talk all we want to talk, but we are trying to solve issues specifically to Burkina Faso, not to the United States of America. So you have to be very careful with that. Because Ibrahim Traore may perceive people as people unless they prove themselves otherwise. And if the Russians are helping Burkina Faso in a way that no other Western society has, why would he say, well, Russian women shouldn't marry black women in this country? Now that's a whole other kind of discussion. But the reality is, most people from Burkina Faso can marry and have relationships from that country. That's not an issue that you should have to encounter right now at this time. At this time. So small steps first. Let's deal with the issues that is on us first. If he say no Western wigs, no more blonde wigs, because there was an African country, at Senegal, the Senegalese president banned Western wigs, and the black women from that country had a big issue with it. In fact, he had to reverse that decision because of the hue and cry from the black women of that country. So you have to decolonize the mind of people first. And you could say, well, marrying white women is no, that's small steps. Let's deal with the small issues first. Get rid of the wigs, get rid of the other things, and let the people see how it advances society first. And then we deal with other kinds of issues that's not necessarily in the face of Burkina Faso people. Because 99.9% of people who live in that society look just like me and you. So that's like I say, don't put an American suit on a Burkina issue problem. Okay. Um, as far as the homosexuality, I am I you have to be careful with me because I see public executions, Saudi Arabia, let's lop off their heads, but that's too far for some people. Everyone should. I understand I live in the West, so everyone should have a right to live. Everyone should have a right to exist. But we want to protect our society. We don't want it to fall into degeneracy and perversions. And if we perceive this thing as degenerate or perversity of our culture and society, we have a right to protect our culture, whether you don't agree with it or not, whether you consider it as backwards or not. So if you're going to engage in these practices, well, we will show you to the airport, we will show you to the train station, or we will show you to the graveyard. The choice is yours. The choice is yours. And that may seem harsh for some Western ears, but just because America it doesn't make it acceptable for every other society. And the Western ears must be able to understand that because no one could tell the Americans what to do. So why do you feel like you should tell the Burkina Fasos or Burkina Babes what to do? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So if you want to engage in that practice, we invite you to leave the country because that's not the direction we decide to go in. But that's my opinions on the thing. I'll leave it there.
But so Buana, just to encapsulate the whole prompt, if they can ban homosexuality, whether it's a big or small issue, that's what they choose because it's not in line with their belief, their African beliefs and tradition. The question still remains: why can't they take the next step and get rid of the interracial relationships?
Because
what are your
usually,
thoughts?
yes, sir, yes, sir. So because usually in a situation like that, you don't want to create a buffer class. The interracial relationships is usually made to create a buffer class, like the Dominican Republic. They created a buffer class of people who had the ideas of the slave masters, but they just they was black, but they had the ideas of the slave masters. That's not the issue of Burkina Faso, where I say 90% or even above 90% of the general public look just like me and you. So that's not an issue that needs to be solved at this point. At this point, and if that arises as an issue, then you say, "Well, we don't want you. We're going to ban Chinese because these are the people coming into the country. Chinese, we're going to ban the relationship with Russians, or we're going to put in our constitution, even if you marry them, they have no right to land. They have no right to certain things within the society itself in terms of gaining power." Because it's just not about a relationship, it's about using that relationship to gain power. And at this point in Burkina Faso, I think it's more than 90% of people who look just like me and you. That's really not an issue to solve right now, not at this point. But if you're living in the United States, if you're living in the Dominican Republic, if you're living in Guyana, in Guyana, where the population is skewed, where you have 50% to 40% are Indians and black people, now that becomes a problem. So you have to, resolve the problem in instituting laws that will protect your society from different things happening, creating these buffer classes. But that's what I think.
I appreciate that, Buana. Musings and Bloom says, because you can't just ban these things while the average racial self-esteem is extremely low, you have to give people something to be proud of and aspire to. So soft power is crucial. I understand that because that that aligns with I think it was Buana who mentioned Senegal banning the weaves, and the women there kind of losing their minds over it. This is why it goes back to the earlier conversation that we overlook the racial consciousness of black women. I'm not trying to beat up on black women. This is not an I can fire type thing. I'm just saying that we gotta check that too, right? Because of the racial self-esteem of if the consciousness was black, was race first consciousness, the women wouldn't have carried on that way in Senegal to the point where she had to reverse that decision. That's wild stuff. That's wild stuff. We really got to work on our race first consciousness. But with that said, let me hear from Black Steel. Black Steel would say.
So this is my thoughts on this. He's not banning homosexuality. I mean, Burkina Faso banning homosexuality has nothing to do with Pan-Africanism. It has to do with Islam, right? I believe it's because it is a Muslim country. He's banning homosexuality for that reason, not because it has anything to do with Pan-Africanism. To Kofi's point, gay people have always been with us, right? But the persecution of gay people, you don't really see that outside of the Abrahamic religions. So this function of, giving people fines and gay people fines or whatnot for doing whatever they're doing, this comes out of the Abrahamic tradition. This has nothing to do with Pan-Africanism. I would like to see any instance of African people imprisoning or punishing homosexuals prior to colonization. They may have looked down upon it. They may not have been accepting of it. But I don't see any punishment, any incarceration. It was just that weird relative. And even with black people in America, we all know somebody that's gay. That's that weird relative that we got that, don't have a boyfriend or has never had a boyfriend before, but we acknowledge this person for who they are. We don't see the need to persecute them and mistreat them. So that's just my thoughts on that. But I would also say too that they're not going to ban interracial relationships because they don't see interrelationships as a threat. They see homosexuality as a threat, but they don't see marrying white people or dating with Arabs or whatnot with it. They don't see that as a threat, right? So that's why they don't ban it. You don't ban something unless you think it's threatening towards you, and that's really they feel like it's a threat, and it's something that could be a potential hazard to um to their culture, and they don't feel that way about gay about interracial relationships. They just really feel like, oh, this is abomination in the eyes of the Lord. This goes back to Abrahamic religion, nothing to do so much with Christianity, or I mean, something to do with Pan Africanism. At least in my thought, I would not say that is something that they would consider it to be. I could be wrong, but I don't. Again, I don't really see too many um, things about interracial. I mean, um, homosexuality against it with it outside of the Abrahamic religion. So I'll leave it there. Thanks.
That's a sobering comment there, Black Steel, because Traore is a Pan African based on things he said about the global Black community. But you're right about that. We sometimes forget that Arab guy. I forget his name. We've showed his videos in the past. Here, that Arab guy, I forgot his name now, but he was pushing that what's happening in Burkina Faso is because the leader is Muslim, and we kind of forget. At least me, I kind of forget that Traore is Muslim, to be honest. So you could be absolutely correct. That's his Islam, his Islamic side, banning, and the country might be Islamic too. I'm not certain, but that's a very sobering point. That might not have anything to do with Pan African per se, but he might be operating under Islamic laws and tradition and stuff like that. So that's a very good point. In the chat, Musings and Bloom says in ancient Yoruba societies, homosexuals were banished from the society as they were considered a problem to the overall harmony to the society. Shout out to Real Black Gentleman who's in the chat. Shaheed Bolson. Thank you, KW7. Shaheed Bolson is the guy who kept ranting that Traore is operating the way he is because he's a Muslim, which is, I mean, let's just stop it. But this point here might very well be due to his being a Muslim. With that said, Jacadero, you've heard everything everyone else had to say. What say you to all of it?
Coco, you still with me? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Yeah, Jack, I can hear you.
We can hear you.
Can you guys hear Jacadero?
Yeah, I can hear him loud and
I
clear.
can hear him just fine. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Let's see here. Okay, so why the question was they banned homosexuality, marriage. I assume marriage, right? Because why? Yeah, what with Burkina's family code? If they can ban this, so it's a family code. I'm not 100% sure on what's being banned. You can ban homosexuality, I guess. Like, I've always thought about this. Like, how can you ban what people are doing in the dark? I hate to be funny about this, but like, how can you do that? Like it's like telling people like, oh, you can't pick your nose. Well, then people are just gonna, if they're involved into those things, they're just gonna do it, behind your back, no pun intended. But if it's homosexual marriages, okay. And then why can't interracial relations also be banned? Let's start on the first part. I think it was Black Steel that pointed out that Traore is a Muslim. Burkina Faso, uh, they they have a significant Muslim population. I think one of their current conflicts that brought Traore to be a captain in the first place was that he was doing a good job of fighting religious zealots in the north. I think in the northern part of the country. And so, like they got big issues. And some would say that those religious zealots called like jihadists are the Tuareg people, and some would say, oh, some Tuareg are mixed of Berber, Amazigh, and Black Africans. So if we're gonna ask like why can't interracial relations also be banned, I think it's because they probably have in those parts where they're close to I forget what Burkina Faso borders, but if it borders those areas of like um those areas where the Berbers, the people that live in the deserts, they probably already have populations that are mixed, whether that's like direct Arab or Arab descent, or like those, again, those people that look like the constituents of Algeria. Uh, and then I don't know who it was, but a panelist brought up, like, I think it was Buana that brought up, it's not even a concern for them right now. They're looking at something that's saying, hey, we just want to establish something right now because it's not a problem. Because we're on the topic of homosexuality, again, I don't know if it's homosexual marriages that are being banned, but if it is, um, the US, the Trump administration has hinted at categorizing I think it's transsexuals as, or transsexuality as a an extreme, I think like an extreme ideology, just because the suspect from the Charlie Kirk shooting, he supposedly had a relationship with somebody that identified as trans. And then the Minneapolis private school shooting, that guy was apparently identified as trans as well. So why do I bring that up? Um, this is, again, this is how my brain processes things. If I'm a politician and the head of the political sphere, I'm thinking that we have to solve problems that are going on. The US is probably thinking like, hey, we are so far right that we want to get away from the left, and it looks like the left supports this call and this openness towards being trans, identifying as trans. And so maybe, just maybe, Traore's government is seeing that once you allow or even entertain the openness to allowing homosexuality, then you can also bring those things that come about. Uh, and what are some of those things? Well, then you can just say like, hey, if we allow homosexual marriages to exist here, then we can allow other things. And what are those other things? Well, then you can just say like, well, on our TVs, because representation is everything, on maybe our TV programs, we need to start adding in characters into our TV shows. There's almost like a complaint now these days where people say like, how come I can watch a random movie on Netflix and somewhere randomly in the story is somebody that is flamboyantly gay? And the storyline, it doesn't even call for this. So I think that they're trying to say that our country, called Burkina Faso, was originally called the land of the, or I think it's now called the land of the upright man. What's upright about being homosexual? That's how I think. Now, the second part is, why not also ban interracial? I always just look at like a people, especially like the presidents. And this is not to harp on Jamaica, but I'm kind of harping on Jamaica. I've never seen a dark skinned prime minister of Jamaica ever. I know Andrew Holness is really, really light. And then before him, there was somebody really, really light. So I'm saying that I've never came across somebody from Burkina Faso that was even brown skin. So I would be surprised if they even have like what Buana called like a buffer class. I, yeah, it just wouldn't make any sense to bring that when it just doesn't even exist. Um, yeah, I hope I answered this, man.
PJ.
So I learned something. Bonnie got a lot of noise coming through there. I learned something today that Shahid Bolson, that's the guy I was trying to remember. Thanks, Kate, to be on 7 for giving me the name. But Provide Triggers for Evolution said he's a European American who converted to Islam. I don't know then. I must not be able to recognize these people. I thought he was an Arab for sure. But my bad on that. So my apologies for that. KW on 7 in the chat says Baruti teaches that homosexuality is un-African. Before that, Provide Triggers agreed completely with Black Steel's assessment. With that said, man, is there any last thoughts? This is going to be the last prompt for the night. Is there any last thoughts from any of my panelists on anything that was discussed here tonight?
Real quick, let me say something. One thing I want to say, because the mention about the Charlie Kirk shooter, the dude who killed Charlie Kirk was a trans person. They had a trans roommate or whatever, right? We got to understand the Charlie Kirk shooting in the historical parallel of the Reichstag fire. So for those of you who don't know, or for those of you listening, and after Adolf Hitler took power in Nazi Germany, there was a fire in the German parliament building called the Reichstag. So at the time, the Nazis blamed the communists for burning down the fire, and it allowed Hitler to make all sort of illegal moves against so-called enemies of the state, namely the labor unions, the communists, so Jewish people, so on and so forth. That's what the Charlie Kirk shooting is in regards to. Him having a trans roommate is nothing. This dude was a lunatic, was a racist white supremacist. However, this shooting that happened is giving them a license to go after their enemies. And that's kind of what they're doing. So gay marriage in the United States will be banned. They've already got rid of the abortion amendment. They're going after gay marriage, and pretty soon they're going to try to repeal all those precedents that happen in the Supreme Court. So they're going to go after interracial marriage. So you may not even have to go to Burkina Faso. Eventually, they're going to overturn it here too in the U.S.
Appreciate that, Black.
If
Yeah,
y'all
go ahead,
guys
Bon.
could hear me, Jamaica had two very dark-skinned prime ministers. Trigger happy named them. PJ Patterson was a very dark-skinned prime minister, and Hugh Shearer. Hugh Shearer was a very dark-skinned prime minister. But I tell you something. Hugh Shearer, he was banning a whole lot of Marcus Garvey stuff in his time. He was, even though you're a very black man, that don't necessarily mean that you may have the ideology of a black person. So you got to be careful with that, especially in these Caribbean countries, because you have a lot of black Europeans in these Caribbean countries. So you got to be very, very careful of that. Color sometimes, because Michael Manley, for his efforts, right or wrong, he was very black centered. So you got to be careful with that in these Caribbean. I got to tell you, Jack Cadero, you got to be very careful with that. We have a prime minister right now. He's an exceptionally black man, but I'm gonna tell you, you have to look at the thinking of people. Sometimes you got to look at the thinking of people, because that could be a big mistake when you're looking at countries and say, "Oh, this person is black, so he must think that way." That's not always the case.
In the chat, Trigger Happy says, I always say the black European is who makes the light-skinned mixed person. So there's always a connection. By the way, it was KW Don 7 who pointed out PJ Patterson was dark-skinned. Hugh Shearer was PM in the 70s. He was brown-skinned. Real Black Gentleman throwing me a little jab. White man with a bed equals Arab. Shout out to Lawrence of Arabia. Yeah, I really thought that dude was Arab, to tell you the truth. Provide Triggers mentions Burkina Faso borders Mali, Niger, Benin, Togo, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire. But in the north, I think they bought a Chad. It's Chad or Morocco. I think they bought her. KW Don 7 mentions Scott Bessent, the Secretary of the Treasury, is an open homophile. Speaking of Jamaica, I think. Musings and Bloom says most African leaders are blacker than black, yet awful leaders. Very interesting stuff. You know what, man? We only got through 3 topics tonight, but I'm okay with that because you know why? The conversation was really, really good tonight, and I appreciate that. But before you panelists leave tonight, before you guys leave in the chat, do me the one little favor. Let's do our shout outs for the week. Anything positive you saw in your neck of the woods happened to you personally, or happened in the black world that you thought was exceptional. By the way, let me shout out Anthony McPhail. I know Anthony hasn't come around in a minute, but I did catch him on Kofi's channel. I think, I caught him on Kofi's channel, I think it was, and he was saying that he was hitting the pavement, doing the work in the streets, and that is commendable. That's also one of the things I've always wanted from Shoot the Breeze too, is that we come through on a Saturday night. Let's talk about the things that we did out in the world for real, for real. So I appreciate Anthony. I hope all is well otherwise. Yeah, Jackadar, you was way off. I hope Anthony is well otherwise, and I hope that situation he mentioned, I can't remember the details now, but someone he knows had a kid or grandson who was killed, and so him and some other men were doing some work in the street. So shout out to that brother. Again, if you guys have any similar stories, not necessarily tonight, but in the future, things you're doing on the outside in the real world, by all means, come to, Shoot the Breeze, let us know. Every week, Jackadero tells us what he's doing in his organization over in Omaha. So you guys can do the absolute same. With that said, though, shout outs this week, man. In the chat, post your shout outs. I'll read them on the screen. Right now, I just have 2 panelists with me. Jackadero's in the chat. But Black Steel, what would you like to shout out this week?
Excellent show tonight. Just shouting out the panel, good discussion all around. I think we have to be careful sometimes. This show is important, even with, we may not have a lot of people on here, but I think the things we discuss are important, and we can't ever compromise the integrity of our show. So that's it. Thanks.
Sorry, couldn't find the unmute button. Yeah, you are correct about that. I'll have to just quickly. I don't mind a dissenting view sometimes, but I do recognize that some dissenting views can kind of hurt the show a little bit. This past week, in fact, it was Black Steel who commented. I tried to act the members of the Discord and try to get women to, black women to speak up on something, and no one spoke up. And, it could have been because of recent conversations in recent weeks. But I also want to say that, we can't be too sensitive and we can't be too afraid. Of course, we can't push the limits and we can't go too far. So this is my shout out. My shout out is to dissenting views that are respectful, that recognize that whatever's going on with black people in a negative light is usually because of these other folks that are enemies, open enemies. And unfortunately, a lot of our people aren't hip to the fact of what's going on. This conversation tonight kind of highlights that. Even on the continent, we have some nonsense going on. So, shout out to quality commentary. Shout out to nuanced commentary. And shout out to being able to accept the commentary sometimes if it doesn't go too far, and being able to roll with it. Again, Black women, shout out to y'all. If you're on the Discord, respond to my thing that I sent out. Oh, by the way, I also sent out a music thing. I was trying to grow a playlist. Only Black Steel and D-Web responded. Some of y'all are actually from the continent, Kenya and Ghana and all that stuff. I was hoping to see some musical selections from those parts of the world. Some of us are from the Caribbean. Let's put up our our musical choices. In any event, Juana, what would you like to shout out this week?
Shout out to Anthony, by the way, for doing practical things. And it is important to do practical things. And so shout out to him for doing that. Anthony, if you listen to the playback, I would like to get your number, but if there's any way that I could assist you in helping or advancing the progress of the brothers and sisters in Shreveport, just give me a call, brother, or I'll try to connect with you. As far as the conversation that we have from time to time, I second Koku's opinion. There should be diversity of opinion, but I would just remind the brothers and sisters, I would remind them that there is a whole lot of, when Black men get together, there is this push and pull. You know what I mean? There's always this argument, and I would challenge them to argue, to try to hold off your impulses to argue with your brothers and sisters, and try to be able to have a respectful dialogue with one another. Let's show the world something a little bit different than we experience in our daily lives and even on YouTube. Fight the impulse to disagree with your brothers and try to go the other way. Because when you go in the direction of the point of least resistance, you are playing into your slave master's hands. One of the worst things in the world the slave master would ever want to see is Black men having a respectful dialogue with one another. That's not a point of his existence. His existence is to always have us at each other's throat. So to fight that slave master in your brain is to, even if you hear something you may not like, fight that impulse and do the exact opposite. The Christians have a thing where they have this thing, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? So I would challenge the brothers to say, well, what would my slave master do? And do the exact opposite. Do the exact opposite. Do the exact opposite. Do something that is completely different from what he is expecting. So I would challenge the brothers to do that. Lastly, and most importantly, to my sisters who are listening, understand that we have confrontational conversations from time to time. Sometimes it may get out of hand, but we love y'all. We respect y'all. Y'all always open to this panel. Always open to this panel. And if anyone was to make you feel as if you are not invited or embraced on the Bitter Medicine podcast, we will fight them to the tooth and nail. Y'all always have a space on the Bitter Medicine podcast. I will just remind my sisters of that fact, and I'll leave it there.
Thank you for that, Buana. My shout outs to all the panelists who are here tonight: Kofi the Black Critic, Black Steel, Buana, Jacadero, Brother Bakari, and all of you who are in the chat tonight. Jacadero, I gave a verbal nudge there. You guys, let's get active. Be it online on the Discord or in the real world. In any event, that's the show tonight. We should be back next week. I hope you guys the best during the week. Be Black, be African, do your best to uplift the community, uplift your families. And until next time, you guys be good. Peace.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Koku. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bitamedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Beta Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Beta Medicine Show, Twitter, Beta Meds, Tumblr, Beta Meds, Instagram, Beta Medicine.